23rd April, 1945. A small German town near Hanover. A broken barn stands at the edge of a field, its doors chained shut from the outside. Inside, 17 German women wait in the dark, thirsty, shaking, told that when the American soldiers come, their real nightmare will begin. They have heard the stories, enemy troops taking what they want, the way German and Japanese soldiers did across Europe and Asia. Then it happens. Boots crunch on glass, chains rattle, and the doors swing wide. American uniforms fill the doorway, rifles in hand. The women press back against the walls, certain they know what comes next. But the soldiers do something no one in that town expected. They lower their guns, offer water, call for medics, and walk away without touching a single woman. Why did leaders lock these women up as a gift? And why did the Americans refuse to take it? This is a World War II story you almost never hear. If you want to hear the full truth, stay to the end, hit like to support the channel, and subscribe so you don't miss more hidden stories from history. 23rd April 1945, near the town of Leer, close to Hanover. The war in Europe had only weeks left, but for the men of the US 89th Infantry Division, the day felt like any other, cold, grey and tense. Their division had about 15,000 soldiers on paper, but in this place it came down to a small squad walking past a half-burned farmhouse and a leaning wooden barn. Sergeant William Matthews led the way. His boots sank into wet mud. He could smell damp earth, old manure, and smoke from houses that had burned when the town fell 3 days earlier. Somewhere, a door banged in the wind. Otherwise, it was very quiet. The barn doors were chained from the outside. That was strange. Barns in this part of Germany were almost always open, full of cows, tools, or refugees. Matthews raised his hand for the men behind him to stop. Metal links clinked as he tested the chain. Then he nodded to a private with bolt cutters. The cut was sharp and loud. As the doors swung open, the stale air rolled out. It smelled of straw, sweat, and fear, a heavy, sour smell that had been trapped for too long. At first, Matthews's eyes saw only darkness and shapes. Then the shapes moved. 17 women huddled in the corners, pressed against the rough wooden walls. Their dresses were dirty and torn, their hair matted, bare feet on cold, packed earth. Some looked no older than 16. The oldest had grey in her hair and the posture of a former schoolteacher. When the soldiers appeared in the doorway, the women did not cry out in welcome. They flinched. One young woman covered her face with both hands. Another began to shake so badly she could not stand. A girl who looked about 17 bit her knuckles to stop herself from sobbing out loud. Later, one of them, Anna Schmidt, would remember thinking, "This is the moment. They have come to use us." Matthews lowered his rifle. He had seen dead men in ditches, villages flattened by shell fire, even a concentration camp with its rows of bodies. But this was different. These people were alive and waiting for something they clearly believed could not be stopped. Behind him, Private James O'Connor muttered, "Jesus, Sarge, what is this?" His voice faded as he understood what he was looking at. An older woman pushed herself upright, leaning on the wall. Her German was broken with fear, but Matthews caught enough, and she added a few words in clumsy English. "We are here for you," she said. "The Burgermeister, he said you would want us. He say this will save the town. 2 days, no food, no water. We wait." The paradox hit hard. These women thought they had been locked up as a gift, as payment to invading soldiers. Matthews later wrote to his wife, "They were sure we had come to rape them. Not because of anything we had done, but because of what their own leaders and our enemies had taught them to expect." He snapped back to the present. "O'Connor, get Captain Henderson. The rest of you, put your weapons down, find water, rations, now!" His men hesitated only a second, thrown by the clash between what the women expected and what they themselves had been trained to do. Within 20 minutes, Captain Robert Henderson arrived, coat damp from the mist. He was 32, but looked older, lines cut deep by months of combat and too little sleep. He stepped into the barn, took in the sight of 17 half-starved prisoners, and his jaw tightened. "How long have they been here?" he asked. "About 2 days, sir," said Corporal Thomas Riley, a medic who had just finished checking pulses and pupils. "Dehydrated, malnourished. 2 are bad. They think we're waiting to—" He could not finish. Henderson did not need him to. He knew the wider pattern. Division intelligence had already warned of at least 4 other towns where German officials had done something similar, locking up women as comforts for American troops, assuming the worst. He turned to his men. "Listen carefully. These women are to be treated as civilians under our protection. Get more water, K rations, whatever we can spare." A standard K ration held roughly 2,800 calories. Today, some of that precious food would go to former enemies. Riley arranged transport to the Displaced Persons Center in Hanover and passed this down the line. Anyone who lays a hand on these women faces a court-martial. No excuses. In that dark barn, another contrast came into focus. Outside, artillery still rumbled in the distance. Across Europe, millions were still in chains, yet at least a group of women prepared for abuse were instead given dry blankets, hard chocolate, and sips of clean water from dented metal canteens. One of the women whispered, hardly believing it, "They bring us food. Why? We were told all soldiers do this." Her words hung in the dusty air. But this was not propaganda, it was reality. The Americans had a choice, and in this forgotten farmyard they chose restraint over revenge. What the women did not yet know was how carefully their own town had chosen them for this fate, and how many quiet meetings and whispered fears had led to their imprisonment in the first place. 2 days before the barn doors opened, on the 21st April 1945, the leaders of the town of Leer met in a dim room above the Rathaus, the town hall. Outside, people could hear the distant thud of artillery and the low drone of engines as Allied columns moved closer. The war had lasted more than 5.5 years. Over 5 million German soldiers were dead or missing. Now the front was at their doorstep. Inside, the air was close and smoky. A weak light bulb swung slightly, making long, jumpy shadows across the wooden table. The Burgermeister, Wilhelm Kraus, wiped sweat from his upper lip. Around him sat the remaining members of the town council, all men, most too old or too useful to have been sent to the front. They had spent years hearing Nazi radio and reading Nazi papers. Those messages always said the same thing, that British and American soldiers were Negertruppen and criminals, that they would rape German women and burn German homes, that they were no better than Bolshevik beasts from the East. Some of it was pure invention, but the stories about the Red Army in the East had a core of truth. In East Prussia and Silesia, Soviet soldiers had raped thousands of women as they took revenge for what the Wehrmacht and SS had done in their country. Rumors had spread fast. By 1945, historians estimate that around 2 million German women were raped in the last months of the war, many of them by Soviet troops. The actual numbers were confusing, but the fear was real. In Leer, people whispered, "If this is what the Russians do, surely the Americans will do the same." Kraus and his council did not trust official promises anymore. They believed one thing clearly: the strong do what they want in war, and the weak must offer something to survive. One of them is supposed to have said, "Better a few sacrificed than all taken." It was a cruel kind of math, but it was the logic they chose. So they made lists. They told the town police chief to bring the records from the population office. It smelled of ink and old paper as he spread the cards and books on the table. Line by line, they went through the names of women in Leer. First, they looked for those who were unmarried and without children. Then they added some young widows. They told themselves, "These women will not be missed as much. They do not have husbands here. They have no babies to feed." Later, Frau Greta Hoffmann, a schoolteacher in her 40s, told an American interpreter, "They said we had been chosen to save Leer. They chose us like cattle. We were numbers, not neighbors." The police went out with their lists. Boots echoed on stone streets, doors slammed, At one house, they took Anna Schmidt, the baker's daughter, only 18 years old. Her father tried to block the doorway. A rifle butt to the ribs knocked him aside. Her mother screamed and clung to her skirt until another blow sent her to the floor. They said I was unmarried with no children. Anna later recalled, "They said that made me expendable. That word stayed in my head, expendable." At another address, they took Elizabeth Weber, a 25-year-old clerk, from the town office. She knew the policeman by name. They had once joked with her about paperwork. Now they spoke stiffly, eyes hard. "You are on the list," they said. "Come." The women were gathered in the dark, their shoes taken so they could not easily run. One bucket of water for 17 people, one shared corner for their needs, the rough boards of the barn pressed against their backs. Dust floated in the light from the cracks. At night, they could hear the town beyond the walls, distant crying, hurried footsteps, the rumble of army trucks on the main road. Some tried to refuse. 2 women made an attempt to slip away that first night. The police caught them, dragged them back, and beat them so badly that one could barely walk. "They locked them in the cellar," Elizabeth said. "We heard them crying in the dark. These were men we had known all our lives. They did this without a pause." The town leaders tried to cover their guilt with fine words. They told the captives that they were doing their duty, that by giving themselves to the Americans, they were protecting German motherhood and the future of the race. It was a twisted use of the same language the Nazis had used for years: sacrifice, honor, blood. But the truth was simpler and uglier. The council had decided that these 17 women were a kind of payment. The paradox was sharp. They spoke of honor while treating their own people as objects to be handed over. Historian Anthony Beaver would later write that such scenes were not rare in 1945 Germany. In town after town, fear and propaganda mixed into the same bitter drink, and local officials made choices that would haunt them. In Leer, those choices led directly to the chained doors and the stinking straw where the women waited. They waited for American soldiers to finish the crime their own leaders had begun. What the council did not expect was that those same American officers would soon turn their careful lists and secret orders into evidence for a very different purpose. Not to use the women, but to judge the men who had offered them. The morning after the women were found, the barn stood open. Sunlight cut through the dust. A few empty K-ration boxes lay by the door, the sharp smell of canned meat still in the air. Nearby, Captain Henderson sat at a rough wooden table, his wet overcoat hanging from a nail, a typewriter in front of him. The keys clicked as he spoke his report aloud for Sergeant Robert Hawkins to type. "Division Headquarters, 89th Infantry," he began. "We have discovered a group of 17 German women held in a barn by order of local authorities. They were to be used as sexual offerings for American troops under the belief that we would commit mass rape similar to that perpetrated by German forces in occupied territories." The words sounded cold, almost legal, but the anger behind them was clear. Hawkins, who had already filled several notebooks during the campaign, later wrote in his journal, "I wanted this down on paper so no one could ever say it was just a rumor or an excuse." Henderson's orders from the night before were turning into full action. By 10 a.m., 2 olive-drab trucks from division headquarters pulled up, engines rattling. Military police climbed down, white helmets bright against their dark uniforms. A civil affairs officer followed, carrying a folder thick with forms. The medics carefully helped the women into the trucks. Rough wool blankets scratched their skin, but at least they were warmer than the barn.